Hey everybody, it's Katie. I wanted to make a quick video about this book that I just read, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's a classic that was written about Viktor's experience going through the concentration camps, and he talks about his experience. He's a psychologist, and when he goes to the concentration camp, he's already an educated doctor in the field, and so it's really interesting to hear his perspective of how he was able to survive this absolutely horrific, most awful type of suffering a human can endure. How he was able to survive this experience and really find meaning in life. And one of the things he mentions in the book is this kind of research he'd been doing on finding meaning in life, and a therapy he was had developed called Logotherapy, which was counseling people in order to find this meaning in their life so they could go on and live a better life. When he showed up at the concentration camp, he'd written a whole manuscript on his life's work on this topic. And when he showed up, they took everything from everyone. And so his life's work, he begged them to keep it, and they just took it from him. And so literally back then there was no computers or second copies of things. His life's work on finding meaning in life was just stripped from him, all this research and effort. And so he had the realization that, okay, I have chills talking about this. It's now time for me to put it into practice as opposed to just a theory that I'm developing. And so, I have chills. He took his time in the concentration camp to apply his work in this logotherapy technique of finding meaning in life and how to find meaning. And so in the most atrocious situation, he was applying this work of, okay, how can I find meaning in this? And I find that to be so beautiful. He talks about in this book how there are 3 ways that we can have meaning in our lives. And the first is through love. Loving somebody else can give you deep meaning, whether that's a partner, a family member, a friend, a child, having that love for somebody else. He talks about in this book, the thought of his wife and the love that he had for her, it transcended time and space. And that image and that memory and that experience that he had of her and the love he had for her, he talks about how it helped to keep him alive. The second way we can find meaning in life is by giving to a greater cause or purpose, something that we feel like we can be a part of and that we're contributing to something bigger than ourselves. And then the third way he talks about finding meaning is through suffering, and not unnecessary suffering that we inflict on ourselves that's preventable, but suffering like what he went through with the concentration camp. And how can he find meaning in that? What is the greater lesson that he can pull from this horrific experience of suffering? And for me, I feel like when we're going through suffering in life, it's just a part of life. It's not something that we can ever avoid. So for example, with alcohol addiction, no matter we're drinking or not, we're going to be suffering, and alcohol makes it so much worse. It just, being stuck in that trap makes everything so much worse. But the thing is, when we're going through this suffering that's inevitable in life, there's always a lesson or a higher purpose in it. And when we can endure it like a warrior and be strong through it with the knowing, the trust, the belief that there's potential for a higher purpose in this suffering. There's insights to be learned. There's things to help us grow and develop and become a better person. And so, an example in my life with alcohol addiction, even though this was something, a pain I was inflicting on myself, it was also very much something that became a part of my neurological wiring. I was on an unconscious level biologically craving alcohol so much, so that compulsory need for this substance, because I was addicted to it, kept me stuck in this cycle of suffering. And as I've gotten out of this suffering, I've really gleaned the insights that have come from it and realized, for whatever reason, I've developed a really strong passion for helping people who have struggled with alcohol just like I did, because I went through it myself for 10 years. I know what goes on in the mind and the heart when we're suffering through this horrific experience of alcohol dependence. And what's happened for me is I've been able to find meaning in it, because I've been able to use that suffering type of experience to transcend it and help others, because I know I'm experienced in the suffering. I know what you're going through, so I have that ability to help others. And so I just wanted to use that as an example, because you know, I think we all have that where we're going through suffering, and sometimes it can feel like, why me? Life is so hard. Like, what's the point? You know, I definitely get those thoughts, you know, on a regular basis, and it just causes me to really do more deep inquiry into myself and the whole experience. But I think that we can all find meaning in suffering that we've endured in our life, and by doing so, by seeing the higher purpose of the suffering we've gone through, it helps us transcend it and helps us accept it and be at peace with it, and yeah, just grow and develop as a person and not hold on to any resentment or bitterness or lack of forgiveness for that suffering we have endured. And so, you know, another thing he really talks about, Viktor Frankl, by the way, you should read this book. It's so good. It's deeply emotional. It's a really good book. But he talks about how he was doing research, because he's a psychologist, he was doing research on people with addictions. And most people, when asked about their life experience when they're addicted to a substance, they say that their life has no meaning, and that keeps people stuck in that cycle of dependence. And I don't know what comes first. Is it the addiction and then therefore your life has no meaning, or does your life have meaning and then slowly an addiction can strip it away? I think it can be both. You know, I think I had one of two ways to go with my addiction. I could have, if my life would have turned out differently and I wouldn't have had the addiction, who knows where I'd be now. Could have gone a totally different way. It's wild to think about that. I'm actually really grateful for my alcohol addiction, again, because I went through the experience and I know firsthand what it's like. I'm an expert in what it's like to go through alcohol use disorder. So it gives me the ability to speak from my experience and help others. And so that was a really big gift for me on that front. But him talking about in here that most people who have addictions say that their life has no meaning, and I think that's true. I think it's nearly impossible to have meaning in your life, you know, real deep meaning that can like move you and you feel, and it wakes you up every day and you just feel like, you know, you're here for a bigger purpose, not a superficial meaning like, oh, I have a good job that I go to, you know, like, sure, that's all fine and dandy, but like real meaning that you live your life to dedicate to, again, whether that's love, whether that's going through a hard time and knowing there's a higher purpose in it, whether that's a hobby that you love or something you do, whatever it is that lights you up. And with the thing with alcohol dependence is it prevents that insight into what you love from ever being able to blossom, because it just keeps you literally stuck in this energetic trap of alcoholism. And there's actually a great book called The Power versus Force, and I've been meaning to make a video about it. It uses the science of applied kinesiology. I'm going to go off on a little tangent, but just a little side note, and I'll make a full video about this book because it applies so much to alcohol dependence. But he talks about the science of applied kinesiology, which basically, on an energetic level, because we're all energy beings, on an energetic level, you're able to test with the science of applied kinesiology basically what vibration things are on. For example, the vibration of love is 400. The vibration of like some really sacred places in the world are like 600 or 700. There's this whole list that I'll make a video about. But for example, enlightenment is like 800. So there's these different vibrational frequencies, and alcohol vibrates at about a 90, which is the realm of consciousness where fear and apathy and guilt and shame and all of these things exist. And so when you're stuck in a dependence with alcohol, you're vibrating at that frequency nearly all the time. And in order to get out of that, to rise above, you really have to experience those higher vibrational emotions like love and joy and peace. But when you're dependent on alcohol, it's literally like an energetic trap that keeps you there. And I know for me, it was like that, where I would want to get sober, and I would get, you know, when I was drinking before the Sinclair Method, I would get inspired to want to get sober. I'd, you know, go on a retreat, a spiritual retreat or a meditation retreat, and take a few days off drinking and just feel like, oh, you know, I'm going to do this. Like, I would plug into that joy. But the dependence that my brain was, you know, taking me down with this alcohol, that feeling never lasted for any length of time. So I might momentarily feel that joy and love and happiness again, but the alcohol dependence always came right back and took me back down to that level of apathy and anger and, you know, all these kind of heavier emotions. So that's a total side tangent on that. I'll make a video about Power versus Force, because it's a great book. I read it on, I did the Audible. But all this to say is that alcohol dependence can really block a person off from having meaning in their life. And it's a vicious cycle. If you don't have meaning in your life, you can become dependent on a substance, or you tend to go out and abuse substances. But when you have meaning, that is when your life begins to have you have a bigger reason to not drink than a reason to drink. And the more you plug into something, the more you find that meaning in your life, the more at peace you will feel just with yourself in a sober, clear state in this very moment. And something for me that I think maybe I took a little bit for granted in my healing process with the Sinclair Method was that, you know, from the beginning, since I started this, I've like found deep meaning through sharing my story and helping others who are struggling find this method. And perhaps, you know, I'm kind of a believer in like, we're here for a reason. And I think I was here to get this alcohol addiction to really go through it and again help people through it themselves. And so by being on this journey with the Sinclair Method, I didn't know where it was going to lead me. You know, I started just making videos because I was like, I really want to do this. Like, I want to share my experience. And so I started with a video, and people would sometimes ask, you know, where is your channel going to go? What's the long-term plan? And even still, I have no long-term plan. I just am following my inspiration, and something that brings me deep joy and meaning is to help others who are struggling with alcohol use disorder and, you know, go on to live a life that has meaning and purpose and doesn't feel wasted or like unappreciated. Because again, with alcohol, it dulls everything. It makes it nearly impossible to live a good life when you're stuck in alcohol dependence. Like a really good life that at your core, you're just grateful for everything. Like, oh my gosh, it makes alcohol number one. So anyway, yeah, I think for me, I found deep meaning in this. And so perhaps that helped me, you know, achieve extinction in the amount of time I did, about 8 or 9 months, and ultimately be able to give up alcohol because I had developed such a passion for making videos and my work that I do now full time in this field to really raise awareness about this method. I find it deeply meaningful, and I don't think it all happened by accident, you know. And so I think that's helped me come out of my alcohol dependence is by having all these meaningful things in my life that I give to that really fulfill me on a soul level. And again, like 2 years ago when I started this method, I had no idea. I was just like looking to drink less and sober up, you know. I just had no idea that it would be such a passion for me. And that's how it happens. Like when you start kind of like following little breadcrumbs towards things that make you happy and are fun, and you don't know why you like it, but you just do, that's when things really start to unfold before you because you're following your heart and your soul's desire. And so, you know, an invitation to you all, first of all, read this book. It's so good. It's just, I think everybody should read the book because it really puts suffering in perspective, and he just has a really beautiful way for us to, you know, learn from something that's so horrific to endure and how he transcended it and moved on to live a great life. Like I can relate that so much to my alcohol dependence, like especially thanks to the Sinclair Method, the way it worked on me. I'm so grateful to this method and to Claudia for her video, and just, yeah, care so much about getting this out there. But I really see how I was able to transcend that dark experience, and now I'm living a much better life. Not a perfect life. Things are still really hard. Emotions come up like crazy, and I'm learning to process and feel things, which I could have never done 2 years ago. I was so weak from alcohol. But yeah, check out this book, and on your recovery journey, you know, on your Sinclair Method journey, follow anything that lights you up. Follow anything that makes you feel excited. And no matter how frivolous and ridiculous it seems, and you think, oh, I could never have a career out of this, or, oh, it's just a silly hobby, you know, do not diminish or dismiss anything that lights you up and gives you meaning and excitement in life. Because, yeah, like I had that chatter as I'm making videos, like, why am I doing this? I don't know what the end goal is. Like, I'm not making any money from it, you know. It was just, but I kept doing it. Like I was just like, I want to do it. So I kept doing it. And ultimately it led me to being able to work full time in the field, like getting a job offer from Ria Health. And I love the company and love what they do to help people overcome alcohol use disorder using the Sinclair Method or other medication treatments. It's like, I just feel like it's really going to transform the way we treat alcohol addiction. So Anyway, me starting by just telling my story with some little videos on YouTube has evolved and changed into so much, and I really believe it's because I was just following my heart, and I didn't have any ultimate expectations at the end. I wasn't looking to get something out of it. I was just looking to share and do something that I love to do, with hopes that it would help others. You know, people always say, if it can help one person, that's good, and that's all I felt. If my videos reached one person and it helped them get better, okay, day is done, like, that's fine. But yeah, it's been so much more than that, and it's been so meaningful. Life before with alcohol dependence was so meaningless. I mean, I had a job and friends and family and everything, but I was very surface level tapped into my calling, my heart, my meaning, my purpose. There wasn't very much depth in anything, except for the depths of despair when I would be in the most horrible hungover state, like every single week. Anyway, so follow your heart, do things that are meaningful to you, even if they seem silly and stupid and ridiculous. Just do it anyway. You have no idea where it can lead you, and that's where we really find meaning in life and live a good quality life that feels exciting and worth living. I mean, we don't even know what's going on here. Like, we're on an earth that's like spinning around the sun. It's like, what are we even doing here? Like, this is, when you really think about it. And so, yeah, like, let's play. Let's have a fun life. Let's plug in. Let's be the best we can be. Okay, that's all from me today. Thanks, guys. Bye.